It was 1986. I was 23 years old, and I got the opportunity to live and work in what was then West Germany. My job was to drive from American post to American post, teaching soldiers reading, writing, and math. Of course, I went to Germany knowing no German and knowing only a few people there. So, the first thing I had to do was find my way to each American post that I drove to. And I would stop and ask for direction in my beautiful Deutsch that I had so well mastered. I say, wo ist der American Post? And the Germans would fortunately not take me to be a complete fool and would fluently tell me how to get to where I was going. They'd say, gehen Sie geradeaus. Nehmen Sie der erste Straße links. And I would be busy translating those first two sentences while they continued to go on. And so, after the German was done telling me the directions, I would get into my car and I would follow those two directions. I would go down the street, take the first left, and stop and ask someone else for directions. So yeah, it took me 2 hours to go 2 miles, but eventually I would get to where I needed to be. And fortunately, they spoke English at the American Post. But I lived in a little village called Holzheim. And in Holzheim, not many people spoke English. And about a block away, there was a bäckerei. And I decided to wander into the bäckerei because I was hoping that it meant what I thought it meant. It was like walking into Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, but for pastries. Buttery, flaky pastries, covered with sugar and icing and stuffed with Bavarian cream and whipped cream and jam and fruit. It was like I had come into a Disney song. And I walked up to the glass casing and I said, I'll have one of everything. Because I was 23 and I didn't care at that point. And the lady behind the counter, she was this sweet older lady with long white hair, and it was braided and wound around the top of her head. And she looked at me with complete confusion. She didn't understand a word that I had said. So I got out my handy-dandy translation book because this was before Google Translate. And I looked up, I want. And I pointed to the pastry I wanted, and I said, Ich möchte eins. And I held up my index finger. And this little old lady cocked her head to one side, and she said, Zwei? And as if it would help, I repeated myself. Nein. Ich möchte eins. And I held up my index finger. And the little old lady, again, cocked her head to the side and said, Zwei? So I didn't really understand what was going on. Every time that I would point to something and say, Ich möchte eins, she would say Zwei. So at the end, she gathered up all of the things that I had ordered, and she charged me for one of everything. I got back to my apartment, and I had been given 2 of everything. And this went on for several weeks. I was like, what is going on here? I had to ask somebody. So I asked my American friends, told them the situation, and they were just as in the dark as I was. They were like, I don't know. Eins means 1. Zwei means 2. It's like, okay, that doesn't help. So I decided to go to my landlord, who spoke both Deutsch and English, and she said, ja, in Deutsch, das ist eins. She held up her thumb. And das is 5. And she held up her index finger. And I was like, problem solved. Tomorrow I will go into the bäckerei and I will show this lady that I am not a complete idiot. So the next day I went into the bäckerei. And I said, "Ich möchte eins." And I wielded my newly discovered thumb. And she said, "Ah, ja, eins." And I knew I got it right. So she's gathering up all of my pastries. And she turns it back to me. She's putting things in the bag. And she's chuckling to herself. And I'm thinking, she just thinks I'm a complete American idiot. So I pay for my things, one of everything. I get home, I open up my bag, and sure enough, there are two of everything. Well, over the years, Heidi, that's the lady's name, and I became friends. She learned some English, and I learned some Deutsch. Mostly how to follow directions, and the names of my favorite things, like Apfelstrudel, Stollen, Schokolade. And even though we could actually communicate with one another, she always gave me one more of whatever I ordered. At the end of the time, when it was time for me to go back to America, I went into the bakery for the last time. And Heidi had gathered together a bag full of all of the pastries that I enjoyed. And she gave it to me, and she refused to allow me to pay for it. And then she came out from behind the counter, and she said, "You come back to Deutschland, I'll give you dry Apfelstrudel." And then she hugged me, and she said, "Goodbye, mein Freund." And I said, "Auf Wiedersehen, Heidi." And sadly, for the last time, I left the background. But over the years, I have taken some lessons that I have learned from Heidi with me. Number one, small kindnesses can make strangers into friends. Number two, sometimes nonverbal communication is as important as verbal communication. And number three, no one makes Apfelstrudel like mine, Freund Heidi. Thank you.